The screaming had been going on for 3 days. Lord William Der Bryos, one of England's most powerful nobles, was suspended naked above a pit of starving rats. But this wasn't his punishment. This was just the warm-up. The real torture, the one that would make him beg for a merciful beheading, hadn't even started yet. What you're about to discover is the most horrific punishment in medieval history, a torture so brutal that kings reserved it only for the worst traitors, so agonizing that grown men would confess to crimes they never committed just to avoid it. This is the story of the Judas Cradle, and why medieval nobles feared it more than death itself. Medieval justice wasn't about rehabilitation, it was about terror, and no punishment created more terror than the device I'm about to describe. Today, I'm taking you into the darkest dungeons of medieval Europe. We'll witness how a simple wooden pyramid became the most feared object in any castle, see why nobles would pay fortunes to avoid this fate, and discover the twisted psychology behind a punishment designed to break both body and soul. This isn't just about medieval cruelty. This is about how power uses pain to maintain control, and why some tortures are so horrific that even executioners refuse to perform them. The device of damnation. Picture a wooden pyramid, 4 feet tall, sharp point at the top, mounted on a sturdy base. Looks harmless enough, right? Wrong. This innocent-looking piece of furniture was designed for one purpose: to slowly impale a human being from below. The victim would be suspended above the point, naked, helpless, terrified. Then gravity would do the rest, inch by agonizing inch, hour by screaming hour, day by torturous day. The anatomy of agony. Here's how the Judas Cradle worked. The victim's hands were tied behind their back. Their ankles were bound to prevent kicking. Then, they were lifted by rope and pulley, positioned directly above the pyramid's point. The executioner would lower them slowly. The point would penetrate the anus or vagina, just barely at first. A few millimeters of wooden agony, then the victim's own weight would take over. The slow descent into hell. The genius of this torture was its patience. Death could take days, sometimes weeks. The wooden point was deliberately blunt, sharp enough to penetrate, blunt enough to avoid vital organs. As the victim's weight pressed down, the pyramid would slowly work its way upward, through muscle, through tissue, through bone, all while keeping the victim conscious and aware. Medieval executioners became experts at controlling the descent. They could make it faster or slower depending on the victim's cooperation. Confess quickly. The torture might last only hours. Refuse to talk. Prepare for weeks of agony. The psychological warfare. But the physical pain was only half the torture. The psychological aspect was equally brutal. Victims could see exactly what was happening to them. They watched the wooden point disappear into their own bodies. Inch by bloody inch, they knew exactly how they were going to die, and they knew it would take forever. Many victims went insane before they died. The combination of pain, terror, and helplessness broke their minds completely. They would babble confessions to crimes that didn't exist, anything to make the torture stop. The case of Sir Geoffrey de Montfort, 1265, England, the Barons' War. Sir Geoffrey de Montfort is captured after the Battle of Evesham. He's accused of treason against King Henry III. The evidence is thin, but the king wants a confession. Geoffrey is brought to the Tower of London, shown the Judas Cradle, told exactly what will happen if he doesn't confess. Geoffrey, a battle-hardened knight who's faced death countless times, takes one look at the device and breaks down completely. He confesses to treason, to plotting against the crown, to crimes he never committed, all to avoid the pyramid. But here's the twisted part. The king has him executed anyway. The confession was never about justice. It was about breaking a proud man's spirit before killing him. The refinements of cruelty. Medieval torturers weren't content with basic impalement. They developed variations that made the punishment even worse. Some pyramids had rough, splintered surfaces. Others were coated with salt to increase the burning sensation. The most sadistic executioners would heat the wooden point with fire. Imagine being slowly impaled on a red-hot pyramid, the smell of burning flesh mixing with screams of agony. Some devices had multiple points, 3 or 4 pyramids arranged in a cluster. The victim would be impaled on all of them simultaneously. The weights of woe. Executioners discovered they could control the speed of impalement by adding weights. Iron blocks chained to the victim's legs. Each weight increased the downward pressure. More weight meant faster penetration. Less weight meant prolonged agony. The cruelest torturers would add weights gradually. Start with just the victim's body weight, then add a 10-pound block, then 20 pounds, then 50. Each addition brought fresh screams as the pyramid drove deeper. The Confession of Lady Margaret Declare, 1322, Scotland. The aftermath of Bannockburn. Lady Margaret Declare is captured by Robert the Bruce's forces. She's accused of spying for the English. The evidence is circumstantial at best, but the Scots want information about English troop movements. Margaret is shown the Judas Cradle. She laughs. "I am a lady of noble birth," she declares. "You wouldn't dare." She's wrong. The Scots strip her naked and position her above the pyramid. Her laughter turns to screams as the point penetrates. Within hours, she's confessing to everything. Spy networks, troop positions, battle plans, most of it fabricated. All of it designed to stop the torture. She dies 3 days later, still impaled on the wooden point, still screaming. The economics of agony. The Judas Cradle wasn't just about punishment, it was about money. Wealthy nobles could buy their way out of torture for a price. The going rate for avoiding the pyramid was typically 1,000 gold pieces, more than most people earned in a lifetime. But for nobles facing the Judas Cradle, it was a bargain. Some families bankrupted themselves paying these bribes, sold lands, mortgaged castles, borrowed from moneylenders, all to spare their loved ones from the wooden pyramid. The torture device became a medieval ATM. Insert noble, extract gold. The executioner's dilemma. Not all executioners were comfortable with the Judas Cradle. Many refused to operate it. The screaming was too much, the suffering too extreme. Some executioners went mad from administering this torture. They would drink heavily before each session. Others would stuff their ears with wax to block out the screams. A few simply quit their jobs rather than use the device, but there were always others willing to take their place. Men who enjoyed the power, who fed on the suffering, who saw breaking human beings as an art form, the survival stories. Incredibly, some victims survived the Judas Cradle. Not many, but a few. Usually because they were rescued before the pyramid penetrated too deeply, or because they were wealthy enough to bribe their way out mid-torture. These survivors were never the same. Physically, they were crippled for life. Psychologically, they were shattered. Most became hermits, unable to face human contact. Others went completely insane. A few became obsessed with the device that nearly killed them. They would draw pictures of pyramids compulsively, build miniature versions from wood scraps. The torture had broken something fundamental in their minds: the international trade. The Judas Cradle became so effective that it spread across Europe. French torturers refined the design, German executioners added their own improvements. Spanish inquisitors made it a standard tool. There was actually a trade network for torture devices. Craftsmen who specialized in building instruments of agony. They would travel from castle to castle, selling their wares. The Judas Cradle was their bestseller. Every serious dungeon had to have one. It was like the medieval equivalent of Keeping Up with the Joneses, except instead of fancy carriages, nobles competed over who had the most terrifying torture chamber, the papal prohibition. By 1400, even the Catholic Church was horrified by the Judas Cradle. Pope Martin V issued a papal bull condemning its use. He called it an offense against God and human dignity, but the prohibition was largely ignored. Kings claimed they needed extreme measures for extreme crimes. Nobles argued that traitors deserved no mercy. Executioners simply moved their operations underground. The torture continued in secret, hidden in castle basements and monastery dungeons. The screams were muffled, but they never stopped. The psychological profile. Modern psychologists studying medieval torture have identified a pattern. The Judas Cradle attracted a specific type of executioner. Men who were sexually aroused by suffering, who found pleasure in complete domination, who needed to see their victims utterly helpless. Many of these executioners were themselves victims of childhood abuse. They had been broken by violence and now sought to break others. The pyramid became their weapon of choice because it offered total control. They could make the torture last minutes or months. They held the power of life and death in their hands. The final screams. The end usually came from infection or blood loss. The wooden pyramid would eventually penetrate vital organs, or bacteria would enter through the wounds and cause sepsis. Some victims died from shock. Their bodies simply couldn't handle the sustained agony. Others died from dehydration. The torture was so intense they couldn't eat or drink. A few died from madness. Their minds snapped completely and they simply stopped breathing. But however death came, it was always a mercy. The last recorded use, the final documented use of the Judas Cradle was in 1447, Nuremberg, Germany. A merchant named Klaus Störtebeker was accused of piracy. He was given a choice: confess and be hanged quickly or face the pyramid. Störtebeker chose the pyramid, not because he was guilty, but because he was innocent. He believed his innocence would protect him. He was wrong. He lasted 6 days on the wooden point, screaming his innocence until his voice gave out, then screaming silently until his heart stopped. His death was so horrific that the city of Nuremberg banned the device forever. The Judas Cradle was finally retired, but its legacy of terror lived on. The Judas Cradle represents the absolute worst of human cruelty. It wasn't designed to extract information or punish crime. It was designed to break the human spirit completely, to reduce proud nobles to begging, screaming animals, to prove that no one, no matter how powerful, was beyond the reach of absolute terror. Medieval justice wasn't about right and wrong. It was about power and submission. The pyramid was just a tool, a wooden reminder that in a world without human rights, anyone could become a victim. The nobles who begged for death on the Judas Cradle weren't cowards. They were human beings pushed beyond the limits of human endurance. Their screams echo across the centuries as a warning. This is what happens when power becomes absolute, when cruelty becomes policy, when human dignity becomes negotiable. The Judas Cradle is gone, but the capacity for such evil remains. In every age, in every society, waiting for the right conditions to emerge again. What shocked you most about the Judas Cradle? The physical torture or the psychological warfare? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Next week, I'm covering the forbidden chamber that no servant survived. Trust me, it makes the Judas Cradle look like a mercy killing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.